So we're going in from the 70s to the 80s. Deregulation happens in mid 80. I actually started working in 81, so I got to see a lot of this firsthand. But let me just kind of recap the numbers for you. So we left the 70s with an 84.6 operating ratio. We go into the 80s of deregulation. The operating ratio goes up, but it's still a very healthy 90.5 for the decade. Revenue has gone up another 350%. So we've done almost $791 million in the decade. So tell us about the 80s. That with this 90.5 operating ratio.
Going from the 70s to the 80s was a major move. It was a lot of change within our company. As we mentioned, in the 70s, we were growing rapidly. In fact, we were doubling about every 5 years. And that doesn't sound like much, but we are a service business. And when you think you're doubling your business, it means you're also basically doubling the number of people you need. You're doubling the capital needs that you have with equipment and terminals. And so we had a tremendous challenge there to do that. That doesn't sound too important, but you think you've got 1,000 associates working for your company, and you double it in 5 years, that means you really need almost another 1,000 people. And it was a challenge recruiting and finding the right people, training them, wrapping them into our culture. So that was one of the major challenges we had going to that period of time. But another thing, I looked around and I realized that we were growing rapidly, that going into deregulation, we were either going to grow or we were going to get out of business, as so many companies did. Incidentally, I saw something once that a chart, you probably remember seeing it, said that it was made in 1978 or 9, listed the 50 largest trucking companies in the LTL business in 1978, 1979, and then looked at it again maybe 10 years later, I've forgotten the date, and out of those 50, only 5 survived. So deregulation just whammed this industry, and 90% of the companies went out of business. The rest of us grew, and you could see that was going to happen. And I looked around, and by that time we had 9 terminals, I guess. We were growing rapidly. My dad was getting a little bit older, was not nearly as involved in operations, and there was a company being run by Mr. Drinkard in his 70s and me. And other than that, the managers were out there. And I got thinking, we've got to have some help. So I went out and recruited a man named Bud Russell, brought him in. Bud was a great guy. He fit our company personality-wise. He was a disciple of the Thompson system, which was very unusual in those days. And he did an awful lot for us. And he was here for those first 3 or 4 years. We opened 7 more facilities, basically in North Carolina and Georgia. We were trying to fill out North Carolina and did probably finish filling out Georgia. But then 2 terrible things happened to us in 1984. First, in January, Bud Russell was off on a trip. He's an ex-Marine. He was in great shape. He jogged every day, and he had a sudden massive heart attack and dropped dead. It was a tremendous blow to our company. He was just getting established and helping us so much. And then a few months later, Mr. Drinkard, who had been with us since we opened the business and was a much loved and much respected person in our company, got up to come to work one morning, stopped at the door and sat down for a second, had a heart attack and died. So in about 3 or 4 month period, I lost both of our officers of our company. And it was emotional devastation as well as tremendous loss. So now all of a sudden we've got a pretty sizable company growing by leaps and bounds, and there was only me and the service center manager out there. And thank goodness they were all good, strong, mature people doing a good job, but they were all doing their own thing. And it was good, but we needed help. So once again, I went out on recruiting trail and trying to find a person to bring in. And I traveled this. By then I'd been chairman of the American Trucking Association. I knew everybody in the industry. I had met them through the association. So I talked to, I don't know how many, 20 or 30 truck operators, trying to find that single right person to bring in here to be our vice president of operations. And I interviewed people. I even went to Montreal and interviewed a guy. I was determined to find the right person for the company. And I wasn't having much luck, but I kept hearing one name all over the country when I go in there. One name was a guy that actually lived 100 miles from here. I'm all over the country trying to find somebody. But everybody told me there's no way you're going to get him. The guy's worked for a company about 10 times bigger than you are. He's been there since he started work on the dock as a teenager. His whole family works there. You're wasting your time. And I was hesitant to call him. I was intimidated, but I finally called him one day, and the result, Paul Taylor came to work for us. And that was he had a major impact on the company. Paul came with it. The company was 10 times bigger than us. He'd been down the 10 years of growth that we were fixing to go down. He knew how to do it. And not only that, he had a great Christian faith. He had such an impact on our people. He was just a tremendously influential guy. He brought so much to us from an operations standpoint, from a personal standpoint, and we will always be indebted to him. So together we looked around. Now still we're just two of us.
Well,
So
let me just interject one thing too. Is many people know, Paul Taylor helped lead me to Christ as well. So
Yes, he did.
So he did so much for us in a lot of ways, so anyway, so.
He did. So anyway, we started out building a management team, and over the next several years, we did build that team, and we had it in place, and it's served us well since then. We've been well established. So it was a period of great growth for us. After the rest of the decade of the 80s, we opened 7 in the first 3 or 4 years. We opened another 9 from 1984 to 1990, but probably the most impactful of that, we opened 5 in Florida. And that was the first time we ventured out of our core territory of the 2 Carolinas and Georgia. And it turned out to be a tremendous advance for us. It helped us with that growth from that point on. So 80s were a busy time.
So in 1983, something kind of special happened. I'm going to show you a picture here. This of me and you and Granddad in front of a truck. Tell us about what that picture's about.
That picture was taken on probably one of the most exciting nights we ever had as a family. 1982 and 1983, we had a little bit of a recession. Our business slowed down. A lot of trucking companies were laying people off, but we kept our people working as was our practice in and always has been, and I hope always will be. But because of that, they were on short hours, and income was a little bit less. And then they did one of the most unbelievable things. They got together and raised the funds within the company. We weren't that large then. I don't know how many people we had in 1983, but we had about 14 terminals, service centers. So we weren't that big, but they took up money and bought a set of twin trailers, and they presented them to us. It was the first twin trailers we had. They just became legal. Anyway, they invited us to go to Atlanta to what we thought was a fish fry. And so we 3 of us went over, and during the presentation that night, they presented those trailers, and I was completely dumbfounded. They asked us to say something. I couldn't even think of anything. It was just to have our people hurting for slow work, and then to turn around and express their appreciation in such a tremendous way was so special. And the interesting thing about it, those trailers today are almost 40 years old, and they're sitting out in front of our support center. So everybody going up and down I-20 can see them, and hope they'll always be there. Hope they're still there 25 years from now.
And the slogan on the side of it that was originated, this originated in Atlanta, as you said, and they're the ones that came up with the slogan.
Yeah.
The slogan on the side of it says what?
The spirit of Southeastern working together.
Yeah, no
And it was a great slogan. We used it for a long, long time. Yeah. And another thing happened in the 1980s too, and that was when we really embraced the quality improvement process, and it had another major impact on our company. A lot of companies were claiming quality at that time, but they were making token run at it and used it mostly for advertising purposes. But there are only 2 companies I'm aware of that really got into it deeply, and the other companies no longer in existence. But we really committed ourselves to the quality improvement process. It was not just something we talked about. We made a major investment of our resources, of our people, and we went through that, and it served us well. I think it's one of those things that helped set us aside, but also helped us improve our company, and it still does every day. As long as we stay with that process, I think we'll always be able to keep this company competitive and well ahead of most of our people that we out there going up against. So the quality improvement process, and the 80s was a good year, except for the loss of the 2 people. We had so many good things happen. Paul Taylor, quality improvement process, the presentation of the trailers. Company's still growing, and we were growing by leaps and bounds. So.
Right, 16 16 total service centers added, as you point out, in Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida. So in 1989, another big event really came. That was the year that you actually promoted Paul Taylor to be president, and so he became our first non-family member president, our third president, and you took on the role of chairman, and our CEO still at the helm. It's really interesting to think you've been in that role now for 30 years, from 1989 to 2019, and hopefully many, many more. But it's just been so great through all the hands-on that you did through the early days to have you still there with your hand on the wheel and your great calming influence. So I just think that's just incredibly a blessing for our company. So you've been at Southeastern 66 of 69 years.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot. If you come back in the year 2050, that's 31 years from now.
Wow.
What would you like to see in the company? What would you like to see the company do representing?
Well, I can't even imagine what this company will look like 25 years, 30 years from now. There's so much change coming down the line, but the things I hope that are still present, and it will be necessary for the company to still be in existence, in my opinion. Number one, I hope we never deviate from our culture. That's the one strength that we have, I think so many companies don't have. And no matter where the economy or the future takes us, if that holds true, we can face that. I hope we never forget our quality improvement process, the process we started back in the 1980s that just served our company so well, set us aside from everyone else. I think that's important for us to remember. I hope we handle the growth well. As a company, I hope we're still committed to taking care of our people. I hope we're still committed to reaching out. I'd like to see Southeastern serves grow even more and reach out into the community everywhere we are. There's so many opportunities to help people, and we have the ability to do that. So I don't know what size the company's going to be. It might be tremendously larger. It might be the same size. It might even be less, depending on how business goes. But I hope it's the strength that it shows today, both in its character and its ability to take care of its people.
All right. Well, I'll tell you this. We're going to do everything we can to do what you just said, try to live our mission, our culture, our quality, financial strength, helping people. And we love you,
Got
man.
it.
Thank you so much.
Sure.